So tonight I want to talk about your lower self versus your higher self. And I'll also refer to these as your immature versus your mature. And I'll also refer to them as your smaller self versus your larger self. And I'm going to tie it right into femdom in the sense that you've heard me talk a lot about staying in the immature or the staying in infantilism or in your smaller self. And for me, for a long time, I think this idea of my safe space, I call it, you'll hear me refer to that as the little kid with his blankie. Oftentimes I think any addiction that we carry with us is in many ways as men not going through that kind of initiation into manhood. I'll even go out on a limb and say that the entire pop culture, advertising, materialism is really centered around keeping us emasculated, or maybe emasculate is a little bit of a strong word, but certainly effeminate in the sense that it's all pleasure-seeking stuff, which is by nature really like effeminate for a guy. And so in the last video, I talked about masochism and suffering and how you're very much punching yourself in the face. But I make the argument that, and I actually need to shave. I just realized that really bad. It's getting a little bit too much. But I realized that masochism and suffering is actually a very masculine quality. It's just that you need to funnel it into the right things. And so obviously staying in a femdom addiction is not the healthy masculine way. So if you haven't watched that video, go check the masochism and femdom video out, because I talk about that more. And so masochism and suffering in itself is actually very masculine in my opinion, and a good thing. So let's go now into the idea of your lower self and your higher self. And I've been reading Carl Jung. I was hesitant for a while just because I felt like he was very wordy, like over analytical, like too much thinking. But I picked up a couple of his books. I'm reading his autobiography right now, which is really interesting. I don't know if it was the right choice to start with that in my Jung expedition here, but so he talks a lot about that kind of shadow self or the inner self versus the outer self. So I'm going to tie some of that idea in there. But your lower self, right? We can call it, you'll hear me refer to that as your reptilian brain or your basic biological shit, your basic biological drives, meaning I feel hot, I feel cold, I feel sleepy, I feel hungry, I feel horny, I'm mad. These just basic feelings that will arise throughout the day. That's very much right, your lower self. And when you stay in a femdom addiction, what I realized for a long time is that I might even be in a upward spiral. I might even be very much like kind of resonating with my mature self, resonating with my masculine self, with my higher self. But then I would just get a little bit horny and I would make a mistake and I would go onto Twitter or I'd go onto Instagram or YouTube or, whatever site that I'm trying to consume this content. I'd be a little horny. And then for me, I can't control it. Like for me, it's just, I gotta be, just abstinence is the answer. And while I have completely reconditioned myself, and I actually have like briefly just like stumbled across content and it doesn't trigger me anymore, but it took me a while, a goddamn long time actually, to get to this point to where I could glance at some content and not be triggered by it. And when I say triggered, I mean falling back into a relapse to where it lasts multiple days or even multiple weeks. And even at this point a year ago, I was very much working on this hard, like very aggressively, but I was still at the point where I would relapse here and there if I saw content. And that was really aggravating because you can't bulletproof yourself from porn in this world, because even if you don't go on to Pornhub or Spank Bank or what's it, Spank Bang, whatever these sites are, you still have Instagram, which is softcore porn, and you still have YouTube, which is softcore porn, and Twitter, which is full porn. So, and I'm not even, again, remember, I'm not anti this stuff. I'm just trying to say, if you guys are watching this, I'm assuming that you want to work on yourself. I'm assuming that you have this as a problem, or maybe you just listen, like hearing me talk, that's fine too, but you want to work on this stuff. So this is, if I'm not cancel culture, I'm not trying to get rid of it, but in many ways it's helped me. It can show you what you need to work on, right? So we're going to get it handled. Remember, if you want to speed up the process, just go to beatfemdomnow.com. I've got the 7-day challenge, I've got the full year course, and I also do coaching, although I'm doing that less just because I've been quite involved with other things. But hit that up, Beat Femdom Now, and also hop into Valhalla Syndicate, completely free Facebook group. We just hit 40 members in there, trying to get that up to 100, and I post in there daily, lots of good stuff, and other guys that will actually help you we're all trying to do the same things in there. So hop into Valhalla Syndicate, do it now. Anyway, going back to this idea of, I feel like we've never been initiated into manhood. And, I've been watching a lot of content recently where there's this one site that I just subscribed to on YouTube. It's called 21 Studio, or 21, I think it's 21 Studio. It's basically like a very pro-man, like pro-masculine. And I agree with almost all the stuff that's in there, but it's also like very radical, almost like fundamental. And so there's a lot of things where I kind of don't exactly, like I am like, okay, that's a good point, but I don't know if I necessarily exactly agree with it. But the point is that so much of our culture is based around being effeminate and pleasure seeking, and I just want to feel good, and I want to eat junk food, and I want to watch porn. And it keeps you in that smaller self, the lower self. It keeps you in that infantile state, and it keeps you in this overall immature state. And so really, and that's why having Valhalla Syndicate is good. And it's actually one of the ideas where I was trying to push and make it, is this idea of being initiated into a group and being initiated into manhood, really. I mean, it can sound radical, right? You have people that are, feminists or mainstream culture will just say, stay playing video games. That's effeminate, right? Stay eating this crap, junk food, that's effeminate. Stay jerking off, that's effeminate. And you want to start pushing yourself, and you have to realize that if you don't actively work on it, it's not just going to change. And I talk about that a bunch. I always had the misconception, like one day I would wake up and it would just be like, oh, like more time is going to go by and it's just going to heal itself on its own. Well, wake up call, it's not just going to heal itself on its own. It will never happen. And no one else can do it for you. Like, I'm here, there's other guys in the group that we're here to help you. But at the end of the day, you're the one that has to pull the trigger on it. So realize that. That's a really important part too. And also, as far as becoming more mature as a man, realizing that I always talk about point the finger at yourself with everything. I even had a couple weird things happen to me recently where it was like clearly the other person's fault, right? Like they're being stupid, immature, retarded, dare I say that word, and they made mistakes, yet I could have flipped out. Like a few years ago, I would have been very aggressive, very confrontational, but not in a good way, right? So there's that stark contrast between being direct and authoritative, which is part of the mature masculine, that's good, and being, being emotional and not having control and flipping out and being aggressive, and that's very much the lower self. So a few years ago, when this stuff happened recently, I would have flipped out. I would have gotten really emotional, really mad. And when this type of stuff happened, a few years ago, like if I got into like some sort of confrontation, I would have been stewing about it for days or even weeks. And interestingly enough, a lot of times, because I didn't know how to be like that mature self, the higher self, and be sometimes direct, but be very like calm and centered when handling a lot of things in my life, I would fall into this very like discombobulated emotional state where I would be kind of just not grounded, and I would like flip out. And oftentimes when I would flip out, I would then spiral back into a Femdom addiction, because I'd be like, oh, I'm being like, I don't know how to handle this situation. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, I feel like I made a fool of myself, or I'm being like too aggressive, or I would just start getting in my head analytical, and I would be like, fuck, I hate this feeling. I hate this over analysis and this weird emotion that I'm feeling. Oh, I'll just go into Femdom. And I would just use that to then numb me. And it's just like, you just get brainwashed, and you fall into that addiction when it's like you don't know where it is that you want to go. You don't know how to handle these situations. And really what it is you don't know how to handle your own thoughts, your own emotions, your own feelings. You don't know how to handle all that, because part of it's because you've never been, initiated into the mature masculine, and you just end up staying in that immature self. And so because you don't like all that like turbulence, right, all that weird kind of emotional thinking over analysis, for me, it used to be a big one. You don't like that, and so you numb it with Femdom. Or you choose to, for the most part, what I can tell when I look at an alcoholic, it's the same thing. I use my downstairs neighbor as an example. I use him as an example quite a lot, and he's 62, I think. He's in his 60s. He's like a little kid still, and he's a hardcore alcoholic. And it's like, dude, you're still a little kid. And that's why, because like little kids, right? Like they get their toy taken away from them, let's just say, and they like throw a temper tantrum. Like they flip out. It's like they can't control themselves, right? That's the complete opposite of what you want to be as a man, right? As a man, as a mature man, as a successful man, you want to very much be in control of your emotions. And I like to sprinkle in lots of creativity into that. I like to sprinkle in lots of, sometimes even flamboyancy, or like if you look at my pants, like there's like crazy, you can't really see them, but I like to wear some crazy stuff and act crazy sometimes too, but it's coming from the baseline of the mature masculine. So the example of a little kid, it's like something happens, they don't know how to regulate themselves, and they flip out. It's the same thing going to my example of my neighbor. He's in his 60s, and he's like a little kid still, and I think that's why he uses alcohol and marijuana, is just to numb himself. It's like you've never evolved to that mature level. You're still in that very much that small self, the childlike self, and so because you're bombarded with all these emotions, you never learn how to regulate it. You go into he uses it for alcohol, but for us, what we use is, or what I'm trying to get you not to use is Femdom and porn addiction, because that shit does a really good job at numbing whatever it is that you feel. When you numb it, now you don't feel it, and now it's really just laziness in many ways, because you don't have to work on yourself. It's like, oh, I could actually work on myself and work on these things, do inner work, do outer work, evolve myself as a man. This mustache here is completely annoying me. You can see it's like it goes super red, and then all this is all blonde. I gotta shave, man. I might just shave it off, actually. Let me know if what you think, if I should just shave the beard off. It would just be temporarily grow it back. But where was I going with that? The idea of it's easier just to numb it, right? So you have to always remember that your body wants to take the path of least resistance, meaning if it can find the easiest way by default, that's what it wants to do. So you have to train it in the point of, I want to do whatever is hard as hell. Now, of course, you build systems and routines in your life to make things easy on the one hand, but on the other hand, you want to push towards what's hard, and you have to learn just to go towards that. I talked in the last video about Steven Pressfield's book, The War of Art. Amazing book. I've been rereading that, like, I think I'm on my third my fourth reread of that book, fifth reread. That book is great. It's short, you read it quick. basically sit down and just start doing your work and man up. I mean, that's really the overall thesis, argument point of that book, is like, you're gonna face resistance. You want to push towards that resistance. You're gonna face fear. You're gonna wake up every day, and by default, maybe when you first start, want to fall back into Femdom, and that's gonna be the easy default. It's gonna be, oh, I don't have to work on myself. I'll just numb myself with this. Oh, you know what? I can do it. I can do one day of Femdom. I can just do one day. Guess what? The next day, let's say that's Monday. The next day, Tuesday, you wake up, same thing's gonna be no different. And then before you know, it's Wednesday, Thursday. Before you know, it's the next month, the month after that. And that's what I'm saying. If you're not actively like putting your foot down and saying, enough is enough, I'm gonna change, I'm gonna take action. And remember, when you first start taking action, it's not like a magic like silver bullet where it's just gonna cut through everything and all of a sudden you're healed. If you're younger and you don't have as much time in the trenches, you could probably get it done really quickly. If you're like a hard case and you've been in it for years, like, it's gonna take longer, but you just gotta keep on. You're gonna fall off every day you get back on. And I posted a really good video too in Valhalla Syndicate last night or a couple nights ago, where I talked about the rule of threes. And it's the idea of, can you go 3 days without watching Femdom? And remember, this applies to any addiction. 3 days. It's called the rule of threes. 3 days. If you can do that, check. Now, 3 weeks. 3 weeks is the critical part. That's stage 2. If you can do 3 weeks, then you push for 3 months. But to me, 3 months is like, you're gonna be solid. But 3 weeks is really the hardest part. And that's what I couldn't do for a long time. I could go 3 days, I could go 5 days, I could go 7 days, maybe I could go 10 days. I could not go 21 days. I would really urge all you guys in here trying to work on this, watching this, try to push towards that 3 week mark. There's a neurological shift. You study brain science, neurochemistry, neuroscience, where to ingrain a new habit takes about 3 weeks. So if you can hit that point, even if you relapse after that, your relapse will be less, there'll be less kind of attraction around it. There'll be less charge around that relapse. So I really urge all you guys as a challenge, hit the 3 days. Okay, you relapse a little bit now, hit 3 days again, and then try to push it to 3 weeks. You'll find if you can make it that long, I challenge you guys to try to do this. The power of threes, the rule of threes. 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. You carry with that power of threes with you for the rest of your life. You can beat any addiction because you always know, okay, I can make it 3 days. I don't care what you're addicted to, Femdom, freaking heroin, I don't care. 3 days, okay, relapse. 3 days, maybe I relapse again. 3 days, maybe I relapse again. 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, boom. Keep on going. Hit that 3 week mark and you can rock and roll. A serious addict can't make it 3 weeks. You can make it 3 weeks, I'm telling you. Anyway, that's really powerful. That's been something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and something that just, power of threes, take my word for it, give it a shot. Anyway, I think another thing is the idea in the War of Art, what Steven Pressfield is talking about, is the idea that there's amateurs and there's professionals. And so really look at your life as, this is annoying me so much, look at your life as transitioning to that professional, right? So Steven Pressfield would say an amateur would be someone, in the case of a Femdom addiction, who they might want to try to work on it a little bit, but maybe they just dabble in it. Maybe they go a couple days and they're doing all right, and then they do a couple days where they're binging on Femdom, do a couple days off of it, on it. It's just an amateur. It's like they don't really care. So start to think of yourself as a pro, a professional, and it's like, nah, I'm not gonna dabble in it a little bit here and there. I'm getting this shit handled. I'm gonna start pushing towards that 3 week mark, god damn it, and I'm gonna push myself all the way to that 3 month mark. I'm gonna do it. So that's you got to start thinking of yourself as a professional. And again, going back to Jung and what he's saying about the shadow self and your inner self, your very childlike phase, it's kind of a paradox in many ways, because on the one hand you want to stay childlike because children, like young, little people, children, they can learn easily. They have that like very like wide range of expression and emotion. I guess in certain ways that's good, but I would say you have to learn how to be a man. In many ways, that again, going back to that default, right? Always talking about like, what's that default? Well, being emotional as a child is kind of that default. We're all born into that. You don't have to learn how to do that. In order to become a man, especially in 2021, which is the current year that we're in, if you didn't know, in 2021, you have to learn how to be a man, right? It's not just gonna happen. By default, you're gonna stay a child. You're gonna stay playing video games, jerking off, eating junk food. I mean, by default, that's what's gonna happen. And, by osmosis, and that is gonna, possibly be femdom if you're naturally acclimated, if you're naturally, I should say, attracted towards femdom. We'll get into why I think a lot of us are naturally attracted to femdom, because I think there's a lot of different reasons for different guys. That'll be a different video. And if you want to talk to me more directly about it, hop into Valhalla Syndicate and have some videos in there talking about that. That's a whole different subject. Why are we attracted? But the point is that if you don't work on it, you're gonna fall into that. And if you don't work on it, if you are already into it, you're not just gonna magically wake up. And so the point is that you have to learn how to be a man. Yes, by definition, a man is someone who has a cock and balls, but that's just physiologically the definition. When you're talking about spiritually being a man, emotionally being a man, that requires work. It's like a skill that you have to learn. So the whole idea, to circle back around, is this idea of, by default, you're very much in that inner self, your reptilian brain, what feels good, the path of least resistance, being very emasculate, being very effeminate. Keep on saying emasculate. I mean, that emasculated is very much is a much harsher word than effeminate. Maybe it's not, but the point is, you're going to stay in this little kid, pleasure-seeking type of state, that lower self, that small self. And in order to push out, you have to start being proactive with it. So I'm going to read more of some of these other books, and I'll tie them in some future videos. But remember, other guys, we're all working on this stuff together. Hop into Valhalla Syndicate. If you want to get this speed shot train handled, beat Femdom now, and hop into those courses, or work with me directly if you want to, and we'll get it handled quick. So just remember that it's degenerative. You can stay asleep for a while, but your life is going to start going faster and faster downhill. So I really want to try to get this instilled in you guys, that in order to become a man, in order to get it handled, takes work, but you always want to condition yourself to push towards what is hard. And the time is now. There's no better time than now. That's another quote. I don't exactly remember it verbatim in The War of Art, but he says the time is always now. The Power of Now is another one of my favorite books by Eckhart Tolle. It's a lot of the kind of main ideas in that is it's always the present moment, but don't put it off any longer. Don't say, oh tomorrow, because if you keep on saying that, as I said earlier, it's going to be next week, next month, next year, and before you know it, that's it. So you ran out of time. So go now. You'd be surprised at how much progress that you can make when you really get dedicated, but you have to make that decision to want to work on it, and you have to make that decision to keep on evolving. And once you can do that, maybe eventually you can get back and help other people and bring other guys up. And I think I'll probably end it there. I think that there's a lot of other things that I really want to go in and talk about, but I want to keep it on topic to this idea of the mature masculine. And remember that being the mature masculine doesn't mean that you have to be dry, boring, or uncreative. By being that mature, centered self, grounded self, it's going to unlock on the peripheral all that extra creativity, all that extra ability to have those little bits of expressiveness. And then you can layer that in, but you have to come from the mature masculine to start. And that's really the key. And then you can start layering in everything else. So hope you enjoyed this video. I liked filming it. I'm gonna try to do a video, another Femdom night series every night this week. Try to stick to it, and we'll make another late night session. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. Love all you guys. You're gonna do it. Take action, get it handled, and I will talk very, very soon. I'm out.